What's going on, gardeners? It's Saturday, November 12th, and fall is winding down here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. But we are still harvesting boatloads of beautiful fall tomatoes. Now, I know firsthand that growing fall tomatoes is not easy, and many of you watching this right now may have boatloads of green tomatoes on your plants that are never going to ripen before the first frost. That's why on today's video, I'm going to show you 3 reasons why your fall tomatoes failed and how you can fix it so you have beautiful fall tomato gardens from here on out. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. The first reason why your fall tomato garden failed is that you transplanted your tomato transplants out into your garden too late. This is the most common and confusing mistake that gardeners make when growing a fall tomato garden, because the concept of growing fall tomatoes is completely different than that of growing tomatoes in the spring and summer. Let me explain. On this seed packet right here, you see a days to maturity. This specific variety right here says 69 days to maturity, which means that from the day you plant your 6-week-old transplant tomatoes out into your garden, about 69 days later, you can expect to have your first ripe fruit. So in reality, it'll probably take something more like 80 to 100 days to effectively ripen all of the tomatoes on that plant. However, it's important to note that this is during the time of spring and summer. You need more time for a fall tomato garden, and here is why. During the spring and summer, most of our days are around 12 to 14 hours long of daylight, and the UV index is progressively increasing throughout the spring and summer. So when you transplant your tomatoes out into your garden in March or April or whenever you do, by the time June and July rolls around, you have much longer days with stronger sun that helps ripen all of that fruit. In the fall, the exact opposite happens. You wind up transplanting your tomatoes out into your garden probably in mid to late summer, and then the days are shrinking and getting shorter and shorter, and that UV index is shrinking and getting weaker and weaker. So you wind up with all of these tomatoes on your plants in the fall, and the days aren't long enough and the UV index is not intense enough to ripen them. Because of this, you need to plant your fall tomatoes earlier than you think you do, and you also need to grow varieties that have the ability to ripen when the sun is weak and the days are short. And for most of us, that is not going to be those beefsteak tomatoes. Save your beefsteaks for the spring and the summer when the solar energy is there to ripen them. As you can see, I'm growing almost all cherry varieties. This is a Super Sweet 100, this is a Sun Gold, and this is a Sun Sugar, because they ripen very quickly, and that's why I'm getting such great yields off of these plants, and I've been picking them for a month now. The other type of tomatoes that I grow in the fall are early determinate varieties. So anything that's early, like a Siletz or like this Margarita VF hybrid Roma tomato, these can ripen very, very quickly. And the reason why the plants look so beat is because I've really already picked them clean. They've already given me their lifespan worth of tomatoes. So the early determinate varieties are really successful for fall gardening because they don't need the really long days of very strong sun that a lot of your beefsteak and indeterminate varieties need. So you can't grow any type of tomato in the fall like you can in the spring and summer. Variety selection is critical. So if you want to have tomatoes that have a chance of ripening, you're going to have to grow the early types that don't need that strong solar energy. Building on the importance of variety selection, the second reason why your fall tomato garden failed is because you didn't select disease-resistant varieties. It is very important that when you grow a fall tomato garden, you pick the absolute most disease-resistant varieties that you can find, which are generally going to be hybrid tomatoes. And the reason why this is important is because your fall tomato garden is far more prone to disease than your spring and summer tomato garden. When you plant your tomatoes in spring, usually they don't wind up getting disease until sometime in the early to midsummer, and at that point they're already loaded up with tomatoes, they're starting to ripen, and by the time the disease kills the plants off or makes them sickly, you've already gotten a pretty good harvest. This is not the case with the fall tomato garden. You're going to plant your transplants out into your garden with maximum heat and humidity, and if you live in the southeast like I do, thunderstorm pressure. So your tomatoes are going to get disease very early on. In addition, as it starts cooling down at night, those really damp nights in the fall are murder for leaf spots. They infect your plant so badly. So you need to grow tomatoes that can handle that disease pressure and still produce. Now over here, you will see I'm growing a Super Sweet 100, which is one of the most disease-resistant plants, tomato plants that you can grow. And while the plant looks absolutely horrible, it's persevering through it, and it's still turning out these 1 to 2 inch cherry tomatoes that are absolutely delicious. So while the plant is really haggard looking, it's doing a really good job. Right next to it, you see the Sun Gold plant. It's not nearly as vigorous because it doesn't have the disease resistance package that the Super Sweet 100 did, but it is still fairly decent. A better one than Sun Gold to grow is actually the Sun Sugar hybrid, which is very similar to Sun Gold, but it has much more disease resistance. And you can see how much more vigorous this plant is right here, the Sun Sugar, than the Sun Gold over here. It's a world of difference. Disease pressure in a fall tomato garden can be so severe that even disease-resistant varieties can fail. This was an Arkansas Traveler that I've always found to be disease-resistant and heat-tolerant, but it pretty much totally failed on me. I got almost no tomatoes off this plant. It's pretty much just a single stem stick, and I'm going to have to rip it out. It was basically a big waste. For fun, I did try growing Big Beef, and while it has produced a few ripe tomatoes for me for a beefsteak, which is incredible, the plant just looks terrible because while it's disease resistant for a beefsteak, it's still not nearly as disease resistant as those cherry types in general. And then these two plants are both the same variety. They're called Ceylon, and this one right here pretty much died. It gave me very few tomatoes, but this one has been very vigorous, has been loading up with tomatoes, and I've been picking them handily. So it goes to show you that even in two separate plants that are the exact same variety, one can be a runt and one can be a beast. So it's amazing how they can vary so much, but this is why you want a little bit of a selection of disease-resistant varieties of different types and multiple plants, because some of them will probably fail, but the ones that hold on will be successful for you. And the third reason why your fall tomato garden failed is because you let your tomatoes flower and sucker on you too much. Now, in the spring, I'm a big proponent of hand pollinating your tomatoes. That way you get as much fruit set as humanly possible, because you want all of those tomatoes to ripen for you all throughout the summer. But in the fall, you have to think differently. Remember, the days are getting shorter, cooler, and the sun is getting weaker. So that solar energy is not there to ripen some huge crop of tomatoes from a plant that is just overbearing full of fruit. So think of it like this. You have half the solar energy. Well, it takes half the energy to ripen 10 tomatoes as it does 20. So you really need to control the growth of these plants. You need to make sure they don't grow too tall and that they don't fruit too heavily. So here you see this Big Beef plant right here. You'll notice I topped the plants so they couldn't grow anymore. I got rid of all of the foliage that was growing up there, and then I made sure that they didn't set too many fruits because I need them to actually ripen with this very weak sun and the short days that we have right now. So that's why I'm actually able to ripen this 12-ounce beefsteak right here, and I have more that are starting to turn despite these cool short days. So it's very important that for your fall tomato garden, you change your line of thinking. You're not trying to get a ton of fruit. If you let them overfruit and you let them overgrow, they will run out of energy and you'll just be wound up with a whole bunch of green tomatoes at the end of the season and nothing red and ripe for you. So again, just to reiterate, you need to plant your fall tomatoes earlier than you think you need to plant them, probably by about 3 to 4 weeks earlier than you think you have to, if I had to make a random guess. You need to select the most disease-resistant varieties possible. Don't grow fun, entertaining, cool-looking heirloom varieties. Grow short-season production varieties with huge disease packages that are able to make it through the summer and into the fall and still have some life left in them. And finally, control your plant's growth and don't let them overflower, oversucker, and overfruit. Don't let them get too tall. top them early, make sure they don't set too many fruits because you're going to have that weak diminished sun, so you want to make sure that sun in the sky gives the plants enough energy so they can actually ripen the fruits that they have, because otherwise you may wind up with none. And that right there are the 3 most common reasons, in my opinion, why fall tomato gardens fail. I've gone through this struggle. I've had years where I've only had green tomatoes and all I wind up with are fried green tomatoes in the hope that they'll ripen in the garage or on the kitchen counter, and often they don't ripen properly. So I've learned from my mistakes and I've changed my mindset, and I grow purely early season production varieties, and I get them in earlier than I think I need them to be, and I make sure I treat them with my hydrogen peroxide spray throughout the summer to keep the diseases down. And I'll make sure to link to that natural spray above. That way it'll help keep the leaf spot and the early blight at bay while they're trying to establish and the weather is still hot. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you're notified when we release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in real life in my garden, they are all linked down in my Amazon storefront link in the video description, so expand that video description and click on that Amazon link for a list of everything I use in real life. And while you're there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. All right, Dale, we are going to work on our mechanics today. All right, stay. Oh, very nice, Dale. Very good. That was a wonderful catch. Nice job, buddy. You have a heck of coordination. You have a heck of coordination.